Welcome back, folks, to Zupi the Autotelic Mindset Podcast. I'm here with Kris Mahler, professional ski cross athlete. Welcome on board. I'm excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
So it's funny. I've been doing a little bit the last couple of podcasts. I've been doing skiers, but different disciplines. So I'm lucky enough to kind of have a little bit of background through each one. But I was kind of sitting and reflecting on and watching some of your highlights, and I was like trying to relate it to something. And from the other ski disciplines, it kind of reminds me of might be kind of a weird comparison, but like bull riding for skiing, because your sport, you have the speed, you have the jumps, you have the turns, and then also like you're racing against guys that are beside you. So just kind of like my comparison to compare your discipline to the other disciplines is like it's like bull riding to me.
The bull riding of skiing, yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, yeah, we usually compare it as like kind of like motocross on skis or something like that. But yeah, it's exactly like that. And I guess yeah, if you take it a step further, there's racing three other guys. It's similar. Like you never know what kind of bull you're going to get on, so you don't know what the race is going to look like, and it's always something different each run. So yeah, it's pretty cool that way.
Yeah, so I'm excited here to learn more. I always like learning more about the sport. Like I said, I've had a couple different ski disciplines, but I haven't had yours yet, so it'll be cool to hear more about that. So I like to I always tell my guest here, I was like kind of run on a timeline. So kind of tell me how you got into skiing, and more so the ski cross avenue on your background. I know you're quite the athlete, a volleyball player as well. So how'd you get into skiing, and how did you end up going down this route in your journey here?
Yeah. So I mean, would have started skiing like kind of many other racers did, just kind of got into the sport as an avenue to continue skiing past like your basic lessons. Two younger brothers as well. And it was just a family sport for us. It just kept us out of the hockey rink on the weekends, which my parents enjoyed. And for them, it was just meant to be a family sport that we could take into our later years of life, and which, I hope it is. And it's turning into that for sure. We just, as brothers, we just really enjoyed ski racing. We just kind of kept taking it a step further each year. And I ended up taking it the furthest. I skied 3 years of FIS in Alpine. So I did start out in the Alpine discipline of skiing. That's where I kind of gained my foundation and learned the skill sets that I'm using today at the World Cup level in ski cross. And that's generally the way you find most ski cross athletes go. They generally learn and develop in the Alpine circuit and then come over to ski cross. And that's for a host of different reasons, but mainly just because ski cross hasn't been around that long and hasn't got a development circuit. So generally you need to build some of your skill sets elsewhere. And then my personal story, I missed making the Alberta team in Alpine, kind of in that grade 12 year, finishing off high school. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to take some time off ski racing. I'd always been kind of focusing on that with school as secondary. So I said, you know what, I'll focus on school now, get some good grades, see what kind of doors I can open up for myself leading into university, which I did. And me being me, I obviously filled that skiing void with another sport. And so I went and played volleyball, made a club team. We ended up doing really well once nationals, and then I got scouted from there for a university team and was offered a scholarship. So I said, heck, why not? Let's go up, play some volleyball for a year. Well, I planned on playing another 3-4 years or whatever it was. But anyways, fast forward a year, end of the first university year, and I still enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun, but I just really missed skiing. I traveled like 14 hours for one weekend just for 2 or 3 runs of skiing, because I just missed it so much that winter and I wasn't doing it enough. So the writing was on the wall, and I knew I needed to get back into it. And so I had a connection with ski cross through one of my old coaches, Bebe Zorchek. His son was actually on the team and sadly enough passed away in a ski race, actually, really bad crash. And anyways, I called him up. He was still involved in the sport, and he kind of gave me the run through of how I might enter ski cross. And so finished my last exam in university, drove the 12 hours, whatever it was, back to the mountains. Hadn't been on skis in like 4 months. And hopped on my skis, went out to the tryouts, kind of just like, it was like an ID camp. And the coaches liked what they saw, and they invited me back to the next one. And then it was just kind of like, it just kind of kept happening like that. It kept getting an invite back to the next camp, next race, whatever. By the end of the year, it had a forerunning heat on a World Cup course. So, yeah, it was kind of off to the races at that point, and made the national team the following year. So that was like, I made the provincial team the first year, skied kind of NORAM, which is the North American circuit, plus some Europa Cup level races, and then started to find my way onto the World Cup. And now we're here, whatever, 7 years later, and I've got a couple World Cup wins under my belt and a couple other podiums, and yeah, one of the fastest racers in Canada and the world.
Oh, that's crazy. So when you decided to go ski cross, was school put on hold for a bit?
Well, no. So I'd done that 1 year university. I was part of a kinesiology program, so a 4-year program that I haven't actually finished yet. I've been like taking some courses here and there. So basically, I finished that first year. Wasn't done by any means in terms of the program. I just went over directly to ski cross at that point. And I flipped focus, and I was like, okay, I gave school some focus. Let me just try to give ski cross some focus and see what I can do with that.
And it's like you said, the writing kind of on the wall. Was still a tough decision to make that commitment to ski cross? Did you have to kind of go over some pros and cons, and this is the right thing, or were you kind of like, let's go, give it a shot, and if I feel good and the vibes are good, then I'll continue with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit more the latter. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to commit fully to this for a year. I'm going to give it everything I can. One of the biggest things, funny enough, is, I mean, it's the sport hopefully is never about money, but obviously that comes into question. And I was like, I want to be able to do this myself. I didn't want to ask for my parents' help anymore. I was, 21 or whatever I was, 20 years old at that point. So I was like, if I'm going to be able to do this long term, I want to be able to make it happen myself. So I worked my butt off in a summer job just to make enough money to pay for team fees and the summer camps that we were going to. And it's kind of like gave it everything I had, and luckily enough, it worked out.
Nice. So what I always talk about with my clients and athletes is, and you're kind of talking about it here, is just like your balance board. That's, you have like your sports and your career, your relationships, your personal health and wellness, and high performance athletes, and anyone in general. Sometimes balancing your board can be very challenging, and where you put your time into and your mindset and how much you're giving that sport or that career or whatever part of the balance board you're dealing with. So it's cool that you recognized early, I'm gonna put, jump in full, both feet, and go for it. Whereas some people are, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that's kind of, I think, can be the make or break from going to provincial to national, or, a 10th place finish to a podium finish, is what I always kind of say. So it's cool that you've managed your balancing your balance board as best as possible. But maybe talk about the challenges of, being so focused in one area. What happens to the other areas, or how do you maintain balance in all areas of your life, so to speak?
Yeah, but it's kind of funny you bring that up, because it's been something that I've been ruminating on for a little bit, and whether or not I was super aware of it back then or not, I mean, I've become more aware of it now for sure. And yeah, I did dive in full and like gave it a ton of energy, and it did lead to some good success. But I don't think anything you can do in life doesn't come without some consequences. So there's no perfect solution, I think, in anyone. Like, if I'm talking to an athlete now, it's like, hey, well, let's just sit and figure out where you're at right now. What's going to be the best? Because there's never going to be like the perfect solution, but there's going to be probably the best solution for you right now and what you want to do. So that's always what I kind of ask myself. And throughout my career, I've had to give different aspects of my life different energy, and have the balance that board's balanced itself differently depending on where I am in my career. So yeah, I've definitely later in my career, as I've kind of established more of a my physical side of things is like pretty dialed up. I've really focused in on that, and that's become quite solid. So I don't necessarily need to give that as much energy as I was at the beginning of my career. I kind of know what I need to do, and I just go and check those boxes and it gets done. Whereas now I'm focusing a little bit more on like surrounding myself with really good people, trying to find that energy around me to be really solid to make success happen. And that's because I reflected on races that have gone really well and been like, okay, what's been the changing factor there? And it, for me right now, it's I can set myself up perfectly physically, equipment's perfect, everything's perfect. But if I don't have, a good team surrounding me and the energy's not good, I don't do as well because we're looking for that small 1% difference, like you said, between the 10th and the first. So it's a constant like balancing act, as you say, and it's a lot of reflection, and just trial and error. And if it doesn't work one day, try something different the next day and see what happens. So that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and people have to understand that you're learning about yourself, and over time, your values and things change, right? It's not always consistent. And like you said, that's what makes it enjoyable. Well, I hope so. And anyways, right, that keeps you going on this journey in this process. So I agree. I agree, and I like what you're saying because I always say you have your balancing board, but this is not a perfect world, and it's never truly balanced. It's just learning from your mistakes and trying to adjust it here and there when you can.
Exactly.
So I want to kind of get into, so you kind of said you made your way up through provincial skiing, the national program. So maybe walk us through a little bit of that, but then also qualification process of how you get to the Olympics and the circuit and everything behind the competitive sport. If you can kind of educate us a little bit on that, that'd be awesome.
Like kind of once you're at the national level, or kind of how you make your way up.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let's say once you're on the national level, the circuit, and I know there's probably points involved and qualifications to make that Olympic team.
Yeah. So once you make the national team, and it kind of depends on the year, but let's just say for argument's sake, there's about 6 to 8 guys, 6 to 8 girls on the team right now that are skiing at that true national level, constantly at a World Cup circuit, and that is the circuit that we ski. So unlike soccer or some other events where there's like a World Cup every 2 or 4 years, depending on the sport, we have a World Cup cycle every single year, and that generally races stay similar. We obviously have a few stops that are different depending on the season, but we start off early December and we go till the end of March, and basically anywhere from like 9 to 15 stops on the circuit. So quite jam-packed throughout a winter season. And you're basically racing a very similar field every single time. But the beautiful thing about ski cross is it seems that like anyone right now, specifically in the guys in that top 32, which is kind of the top echelon of the sport, can win a race. So you don't really know. It's not like, one guy's always winning every single race, every single stop, which is quite cool. And then from there, to take it to the Olympics, which obviously happens every 4 years, we have a qualification process that occurs 2 seasons prior to that Olympics. So like the season prior to the Olympics, plus let's call it 3 months right before the February Olympics. So we have a qualification process that goes out, and it's kind of interesting because FIS, so the Federation International de Ski, that outlines like what countries are going to be allocated for number of spots. They tell the countries, okay, you're going to get 4 spots, and that's based off of how they've done in past Olympics. So generally Canada, and in the past, 11 years now, or in the past 11 years, I think we've won the Nations Cup for 7 years. So generally we get 4 spots guaranteed, men and women. So what that means is then Canada can go back and internally be like, okay, how do we? And the interesting thing about ski cross is it's under the umbrella of freestyle within Canada. So we actually compete against moguls, half pipe, slope style, all those freestyle events. So we don't compete against alpine, the downhill super G, slalom, or GS. So we compete against freestyle, and people in the office deal with how they're going to pick that team. It's kind of interesting. It's a very complicated document. We do sign off on it, but honestly, it's like, it is what it is. You're going to try and race your best each race and see where it stacks you up. But basically, there's different tiers, and depending on the season, you can enter a tier with a certain result, and that will guarantee you to a certain degree a spot on the team. But in theory, all the way up until that last race, you can be, moving around depending if the points are quite close, but you also are taking into consideration how other sports are doing, because that could take a spot away from that 4 or, whatever spot you get. So again, quite complicated. Me personally, I don't spend a lot of time on that. I even up until that last race, I hadn't really calculated the points. I knew it was going to be quite close. Like this is coming into the last Olympics. But it can be quite complicated, but at the end of the day, the faster you ski, the better chance you have of making that team.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, every sport's a little bit different, the qualification process, and it's like, it just gives people perspective how hard it actually is to make those Olympic Games. You can be the fastest guy here, but like you said, you're dealing against a couple other disciplines, maybe a couple other countries. Like there's so much that goes into it, which it just puts things into perspective. How, like you said, how good or how fast you have to go in order to.
Yeah, like to give you, I can even extend on that point. I mean, a little bit, I wouldn't call it controversial, but to give you an extent of how hard it actually is, I won the last World Cup qualifying event. So I was number 1 in the world at that event. It was the last race right before the Olympics, and that still wasn't enough to put me into even the 4th spot, just with the way the points were working out. So yeah, it's Canadian ski cross team specifically, I would say, I would argue that it's probably one of the hardest Olympic teams to make in the world. So just because we have such a high level of competition, and any, within those 6 guys, it's like, it's just moving around so much. So yes, it's quite difficult to make.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's funny, I was watching one of your videos, and you just kind of hinted on it earlier about to crack that top 32 number. Like if you go down to the top, if you go to the 60 skiers in the video, you said like it's only a matter of like a meter or two between the whole race of guys. That's just crazy how, like you said, how close it is.
Yeah, it is wild. Yeah, you stick your hand out wrong, you're not going to qualify, kind of thing. So it's you fully have to be dialed for that run.
That's crazy. So obviously, like Olympics, it's a big 4-year process, and I know like you're talking about, it's it's a difficult process, but just being on the circuit itself, I was talking about like goal setting. You're trying to qualify for something like the Olympics 4 years, but also like breaking your circuit down year by year, month by month. How do you goal set? How do you how do you prepare yourself for each race, each year, and so forth?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, generally, Olympic sport, amateur sports, a lot of athletes will say, they'll break it down into a 4-year cycle. And I'm no different from that regard. I definitely look at it as a 4-year cycle. I find that as a nice chunk of time. One, because of the Olympics. I mean, yeah, that's part of it for sure. And as I've not made the last 2, it's become a little bit less a part of it. Funny enough, for me, I've been focusing a little bit more on another goal, which is that crystal globe. And that's arguably probably the hardest medal to win or trophy to win in ski racing, freestyle, alpine, anything like that, right? And that's just because you need to be consistent throughout the entire season, and you're the top athlete at the end of the season. So for me, specifically in this sport, because it's so tight and anything can happen, and there are things that are really out of your control, it's not just like, you could show up on a day and be delivering a podium performance, but something might happen because you're skiing against 3 other guys and you might go up first round. So in theory, you could have been the best guy, but just because something crazy happened, the wind was wrong, whatever, you're not going to make it through the round. So for me, it's more about if you show up consistently and you're showing performance, podium performances, that to me as an athlete speaks to a higher level, I guess. It's kind of an interesting thing. So for me, that crystal globe is what I'm really aiming after, and why my video series is called Chasing the Globe. we travel around the globe, but it's also chasing the crystal globe for me. So, it's kind of from that side, it's kind of interesting.
And do you put together like before the season, like some sort of performance plan, to make sure you're meeting certain checkpoints, physically and mentally, throughout the season?
Yeah, definitely. Like we have some, like right now, literally like 2 days ago, I filled out kind of my year-end review where I thought I was at, and then the coaches will do the same. It's like a blind review, and then the graphs will get overlaid, and we'll kind of see based off of my perspective, their perspectives, where I was sitting, post season, and then every race, we do a debrief on the one before, and just kind of see like what went well, what didn't. Things we want to change, any, little things like that. And they're not long meetings, maybe 30 minutes. They're just good to have as a good touch point, and it just gives you a refocus on what you need to do. So, when you're rolling, when you're doing well, it's quite easy. You just say, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. When you're not, it's kind of the battle between trying to fix too much, trying not to reinvent the wheel, and just, stick to what you're doing, which was a little bit of my season this year, but it was overall not too bad.
Yeah. And I mean, with technology too, like I saw some video clips, like you guys are, you're watching your race on video, how technical, because athletes, I mean, in your sport, when all sports are getting so good and so technically soundly, it comes down to, like you said, seconds. So to have something like you guys now watching video, which, years past, they probably didn't really watch too much, maybe what was on the screen, what they had, but now you can dial it right in, now with some of the stuff, the tools we have. So I saw like, you're watching your video, and then obviously, I think you guys were going up the run, critiquing the run, and like, where's a hard spot, tough spot. I know you guys, I don't know the lingo as much, but it's how technical it is, and the conversations you guys have, with your coaches and teammates. It just makes for a different dynamic opposed to just going down the hill.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's become quite technical. Videos is like one component, and then a lot of teams, including ourselves, are starting to play with like really precise GPS units that we'll be wearing, so we can see entry and exit speeds, G-forces, and that overlaid with video is quite informative, because a lot of times, you'll come into a section after a steep section, and your exit speed off of a steep section onto flats is quite important, because if you're slower, 2K slower by the end, you can be like 5 meters, right? So you start doing these calculations, and you start to really realize how much of an effect these little things have. So it's it's part of it for sure. It's easy to get really to dive into it too much at times, and sometimes you just gotta go out and ski at the same time. So it's like coming back to that balance board, figuring out how much you need and how much you don't.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to like the next question here with regards to how do you maintain, your emotional and physical balance on race day? Because I know there's a process to race day with regards to, qualifications, and then the next day you're racing. I mean, you'll probably explain it better here in a moment, but how do you stay emotionally and mentally sound so that so you're not too high, not too low, and you're ready to drop into that, like we're talking about, nice flow state when the time comes?
Yeah, obviously that's the hardest part about sport, is bringing that mental side into it on race day, or when you need to compete. So for me, I just constantly have a little bit of like a few check-ins throughout the day, and I try and keep the structure of how I do things very similar, so that I kind of come back to it and it seems similar. I'm like, okay, where am I at right now? How did I feel last race? How did that work out? And like I said, like I've done those reviews already, so I kind of know how I want to feel at certain points throughout the day. But generally, for me specifically, and again, it's different for everyone, but for me specifically, I wanted to just try and stay loose. Like I'm enjoying it, taking it all in. I'm still working when I need to work, focus when I need to focus. But if I focus too much, I'm too serious for the entire time, I just burn out. I'm quite an analytical person as it is. So for me, and to the outside world, it might look like I'm kind of joking around or not really focusing up, but I do have some very intense blocks where I do focus up, and that's generally what you don't see on TV. So for me, it's that 30-minute window right before I do my first run is when I really focus up. And I've gone through some of my visualization already, but that's where I'll do it to, 3 or 4 more times. I go through a physical warm up, and that just kind of like everything's put in place for a certain reason. And that brings me to a good spot. So it doesn't really matter like where I'm at prior. That 30-minute block is really what like narrows me down. That's where I focus. And then as soon as I click into my skis, that's where I just enter like, race and a horse and a race blocks kind of thing. Like you could be talking to me and I won't even hear you. Like I'm just focused on that next feature, what I'm about to do. And then usually the nice thing about ski cross is the day starts to roll. So if you make it through that first round, hopefully you focused up properly, it works out in your favor. You come back up, have a sip of water, and you're back in the gates again. And you just kind of do that for another 4 rounds. And you don't need to like really worry about where you're at. Obviously, if you start making it into finals and stuff like that, podium performance potentials, that's where you generally have to take a minute going up the lift or whatever it is right before that race. I usually take, where am I at? Just take like a mindful moment, be like, hey, where am I at right now? Do I feel like I'm confident to run this race? But the nice thing is generally you've had 3 heats that have gone quite well, obviously, to get you to this point. So you can kind of just roll off that and be like, yeah, I'm skiing well, I'm ready to go. And usually for me, it's about bringing myself down. So I just do some like basic breathing, it's like box breathing or something like that. It just brings me back down to a little bit lower heightened state because it's, again, you don't want to be too high with that. So yeah, it's kind of what I do.
Okay, so yeah, just going back to some of your points, you were saying, that it's not getting too high, not getting too low, and remaining, in that balance. Can you kind of like you're talking about visualization, breathing, and maybe talk us through some of those blocks where you're more trying to stay loose versus focus, and maybe your process to visualization, to breathing. Maybe do you listen to music? Walk us through your prep before you kind of go down that hill where you really get dialed in?
Like that 30-minute block that I was talking about, like what I really do?
Yeah, like so even throughout the day, if if like you said, you do visualization a couple times throughout that day, if you can kind of walk us through your process, when maybe you do things and what that maybe kind of looks like for you when you do it.
Yeah, visualization, obviously a very powerful tool, and specifically in ski cross, was an interesting one for me to kind of develop from my alpine days. Because in alpine, you know the course. So that course is not going to change. You've inspected it. You've gone through your inspection run, which is just like a very slow, you can't ski it. You can just slide down, you look at the gates, count the gates, whatever it is that you're doing, sight lines. And so that course is going to be relatively, plus or minus a few ruts from other skiers, is going to be exactly the same. Whereas ski cross, one, the course is quite a bit bigger in terms of line choice that you have. 2, there's going to be 3 other guys that are on that course. So it's going to change every single run, and you don't know. Obviously, you want to be number 1 coming into that first turn and hopefully be number 1 all the way down, but you don't know where you're going to be. So maybe a line that you wanted to run is not available because there's 2 other guys in that line. So for me as a skiing athlete, I had to really kind of adapt to that. And I played around a lot with my visualization techniques when I was kind of coming up through the sport. But what I've kind of landed on and what I've kind of come to is I just learned the course quite well. So I spend quite a bit of time on that inspection run. Generally, I actually do 2. My first one, I just go through it at a little bit faster pace, still sliding, but I just get a sense for maybe my best sight line that I love. And I just get a sense even for the snow, the way the snow feels under my skis, whether it's hard, soft, whatever, right? You get a sense for that. And then I come around again for my second run of inspection, and that's really, really dial in my like sight lines. So I'd actually get into my tuck and I'll be like, okay, this is kind of what I can see at this point in time in this course. And then I kind of visualize, if there's another guy here, what's going to happen? And I usually break it down into sections. So I'll do the start, and I just sit in that start section and I look at it, and then I try and visualize it. And once it's imprinted in my mind to a degree that I feel very like as if I could run it right now, that's when I move on. And then I move on to the next section. And then I visualize that section, and then I put and then before moving on to the next section, I put the 2 together. And then once I have that, then I move on again. And then, so I basically just like kind of like build those blocks all the way down the course. And by the time I get to the finish line, I'm very confident with the course, and I could run any line that I want. The interesting thing about ski cross too is we don't have a lot of training runs. We only generally usually get 2, sometimes 1, sometimes none. So you need to be like very dialed, and visualization allows you to really basically run the course without actually being on it. Because I've seen enough of these features. I've been on these courses multiple times for most part. I know generally how it's going to feel. So I actually like bring all of those senses into that visualization. And by the time I get into that first gate, I can ski that course at probably 95% of my top speed. So it's not like my first run is going to be quite a bit slower than my final run for qualification. So, and that is because of my visualization techniques that I use. And yeah, I've learned that course in inspection to the nth degree. I mean, even now you could pick a course from the World Cup season this year, and I could tell you, like, on jump 3, the left side was better takeoff than the right side. So like I know these things down to that kind of detail. And so from that side, that just gives me a lot of confidence, and as well just leads to you just leapfrog yourself in that when you actually get to those runs, those physical runs, and then you take your physical, what you learned, you apply it back again to the visualization, and then again, you just kind of keep leapfrogging from there. And so race day specifically, like, because we generally had a training day and a qualification day already, I already know this course quite well. And it's actually a little bit more of just like going through the motion and just like, again, feeling the course. So it's like, okay, I feel like I needed another training run today, so I'll just go through it again. But some days I feel super confident and I don't visualize as much because I'm like, I know it, I'm good. I spend my energy elsewhere. So yeah, that's kind of how I use it.
And I like what you're saying. So I was having a conversation with another skier about this as well. And like, I think it's important for like athletes that are listening to you guys talk, and kind of hinted on, it's like visualization. Everyone thinks to like see and like, I have to see the course, see me doing this. But what you tapped into is your sense. It's not all about the actual seeing. It's about the feeling, the touching, the wind, the snow. I think people sometimes get caught up in the actual meaning of the word visualization, when to create to enhance that tool. I think you have to bring in all the senses, because we're not just gonna close our eyes or look down the mountain and see that perfect run that we're trying to accomplish. You have to bring in all the other aspects. I think the more detail you bring, the more effective the visualization becomes. So I'm just kind of reiterating what you're saying, and people are listening, athletes are listening to this, like, yeah, you got to bring in more stuff, or as much as you can. And kind of like what you're saying, it comes with experience as well. Like you said, now all the courses more or less, that it's a little bit, say, easier, or you don't have to spend as much time. But regardless, it's a very powerful tool, especially in the sport that you guys are doing. So I'm just kind of reiterating to people that are listening the importance of, I'd say, the 5 senses and everything you can bring in to get really dialed in, like you're talking about.
Yeah. No, the more you can bring in, the better, for sure. Sometimes I'll even make noises if it's like a hard section, and I'll do that in my visualization. Like, it seems so silly when you're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm here to win, so I don't really care if you think it's silly. Like, I'm going to beat you because of this. So it's like the best in the world do it. So try it, see what happens, see how it works for you.
That's right. And then kind of going off of that, because the sport is so fast, and obviously you're prepping yourself to that starting gate, and we want to drop into what we know as flow state, or being in the zone where you feel and perform your best. When you are going down the course, because it's so fast, is it just muscle and mind memory, like the thinking is gone, or are you unconsciously or consciously thinking like, I got to get ahead of this guy, I got to get closer, whatever that self-talk may be? Do you have that self-talk during a race, or it's just so fast that you let the mind and body take over?
Yeah, I mean, each course is a little bit different from a technical standpoint and how it feels on the body. So like some courses you feel like you have more time to think, whereas other courses you feel like everything's happening so fast that you're just like reacting and trying to stay ahead of it, basically. But yeah, it's an interesting thing with the sport, like the flow state feeling, and I've for sure I've been in it a few times. And when you're in it, it's just like, it seems like you're aware of all those things and you're able to make those decisions, but you're not consciously making those decisions. They're just kind of happening as they should, which allows for like a great performance. And I guess that's the pinnacle of what flow state is. And it's not like you're like consciously making that decision to make it happen. It's just, you know what decision to make. And so, yeah, it's probably one of the hardest things in sport to find, or in life to find. But when it does, it's quite interesting. And I think athletes, that's probably what we're addicted to trying to chase. So, yeah, for sure. I've been in it before. And when I'm close to it, you can definitely feel it. And I would say that for me specifically, it's like confident consciousness. I don't know. I guess that's like the best way for me to put it. So I'm in a very like confident state. And then there's never like a second guessing of that, oh, should I make this decision? It's just like, make that decision and I'm going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah.
That's when I feel like I'm the closest to like the pinnacle of flow state. And that's where I feel like that's what I'm always trying to chase. And if it enters into that full flow state, amazing. I just let it happen. But yeah, when I'm confident and then I consciously make decisions, like that's when it generally works out the best. And yeah, if you're behind a guy coming into a turn and you kind of know, okay, if he's going to go wide here, I'm going in tight, I'm going to make that pass. Like, it's just, I know that door's going to open. And that's what's crazy about ski cross is like, kind of, it's like the baseball. It's like hitting a baseball from a professional pitcher. You have to make your decision before you even let go of the ball. It's like, how is that even possible, right? And the same with ski cross. I have to make my decision on where I'm going to make that pass before that door even opens for you to make the pass. So it's like, it's as if I know he's going to go, a guy's going to go further right, further left. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's also why this sport has like spectacular crashes, because you make a decision and suddenly that door closes and it's all over in that moment. But it's also why, you have some incredible passing as well and some feats of true like physical brilliance, right? When going down these courses, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. I had some friends come on our last World Cup course because it was actually at a home World Cup, and they were like, "Holy shit!" Like it's one thing to watch on TV, but like now to be in it, it's like the fact that you guys do this with 3 other people is just absurd. Like you're nuts, basically. So yes. So again, going back, it's just like you have to be super confident wherever you find that. Each athlete's different. For me, it's like I said, a lot of visualization, and then I just make those decisions as they come and as they needed.
Yeah, I like that. And then I like what you said, and it's something I've reflected on with some of my guests on the show is, especially if we talk about Olympics, you have that Olympic goal to, make the Olympics, maybe one day win a medal, gold, silver, bronze, whatever it may be. But I think I like what you said. It's these athletes, a 4-year process, and you're chasing moments, you're chasing those flow state moments, those moments where you feel so good. And then when you actually get to the Olympics, or when you win a globe or whatever it may be, that it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's obviously amazing, but it's those little moments that you guys, I think, are chasing to get there are like, that's what, that's the bread and butter. That's the good stuff, where winning those big championships, that's maybe just a cherry on top. But yeah, I find the athletes are just chasing moments, and it keeps them going. It keeps them going, right?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. It's like the Olympics is kind of the thing as a kid that you go after, and that's probably why you started the sport. But then, yeah, when you're in the sport, you're realizing what it's all about. And yeah, like you said, it is those moments. It's just those small little bits of brilliance. And sometimes it's like those are the things that people are never going to see or never going to talk about again. But it's just like, it's quite an addictive, and it feels very cool to experience something like that. And you're like, wow, that I set myself up on today to enter that state and to feel that. Like, that's what I want to try and do again.
Yeah.
So that's, for me specifically, yeah, it definitely keeps me going. That's why I love the sport.
So I'm going to kind of flip the scenario here. Obviously you want to feel good, perform good, but I was watching a clip of yours that you posted, and you used the word frustrated. I was very frustrated. I got knocked out the first round, 2 races in a row. And then you go off to say, people tell me it's all part of the game. It's all part of the game. And you're like, I'm trying to feel that or understand that. And it's funny, you're talking and I'm watching you, and the look on your face was, you were, like you said, so frustrated, even though you're trying to grasp that concept of it's all part of the game, quote, so to speak. So going back to the other side, when you miss a cut or when you're not performing your best and you're frustrated, how do you rebound? Because you guys have such so many races in a season, or even if you do make a cut but it wasn't necessarily your best, how do you get that confidence back to go race again?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like every athlete is a little bit different. For me, it's still building a process. I've talked about this many times before. That's where I get a lot of my confidence, is building a process. And what I mean by that is literally everything that I do on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis, and that whether that's that 4-year cycle or just the season that we're kind of in, it's those things that build the confidence to get me to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to race and ready to win. And where that frustration comes out is when I'm like, I know that process is going to make me win. It just didn't work today.
Yeah.
And again, it's like in ski cross, there's so many different reasons why it might not work. It's not like a swimming race where you just weren't fast enough today. Yeah. And that's gonna lead to a different level of frustration for an athlete. Whereas like some guy might have just cut me off today, or my ski might have just blown off for no reason other than it just hit a bad bump. So in ski cross, yeah, there's a lot of like external factors that can lead to like poor performances or good performances. You need a little bit of luck on your side, but again, you don't have control of those things. What do you have control of? You have control of how you set yourself up to race on that day. So yeah, I have frustration. Obviously I'm there to win. If it doesn't happen, like I know exactly what it was. You're talking about Sweden, Idre Fial, one of our biggest races of the year, and yeah, this season, like I was out first round, both races, and it was like, I come here to race 4 rounds every single race. That's what I want to be doing, and it didn't happen. And I was skiing well, I was qualifying well. I mentally in the gate felt super good. Visualization was going really well. My nutrition was there, body was feeling good. Skis were fast. So it's like the process was there. I did everything I needed to do. I checked all the boxes. Yeah. Still didn't work. So that's where it's frustrating. But again, that's like, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And it is frustrating. And that's almost like the frustration. You can either let it lead to, I'm going to give up, or you can let it lead to like fire your butt up to go do some more, like want it a little bit more. So yeah, for me, if I ever get to the point where it's like frustration leads to, I don't want to do it, then maybe that's a sign I don't want to do it. Right. Yeah. But when it's at the point where I'm like, I'm frustrated, I want to win, let's go back and figure out how to make it win.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I like how you put that into perspective and context. For you and in your sport, that makes a lot more sense. And like you're saying, I was take words, what words actually mean are different for everybody. Like you said, frustration seems like a negative word, but like you said, maybe it's just like, let's get our butt in gear. Let's take this up a notch. Even like I had one athlete, frustration can sometimes mean you're getting really close to making a breakthrough, right? You're getting close to what you need to accomplish, but there's just a little more mud you have to truck through. So, words and meaning and what they mean to you and how you handle them is different, but important, because like you said, if it comes to that point where you're not having fun, or your results are consistently not where you want them to be, then we have to switch something up or change the game plan or the process, like you kind of talked about here.
That's, I guess, even further, like that's probably the hardest part, is when you're frustrated and stuff's not working out, is you want to change everything, because you're like, well, that has led to, like, it feels like the world ended when you didn't make it. But it's like, again, in our sport, the difference between first and last is so small. So yeah, you don't need to change everything. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's like, okay, let's just go back. Let's analyze why that race didn't work. Is there a small little thing, or was it just something out of your control? And you're just going to have to be like, okay, that was what it was, and we're going to go back and do it again. And I might do the exact same things next week, and it's going to work. Yeah. So that is very difficult to do as an athlete, to trust. But again, that's for me. Again, I go back to my process, and it's almost like I heard Kobe. He was like, he's like, I signed a contract to myself at the beginning of the season. This was what I was going to do to make it happen. And he's like, I'm not wavering from that. And so I think that helps. It helps like to get you to success. But when success isn't happening, it almost helps to be like, no, this is what I committed to doing. I know it's going to get me there. I committed to it earlier. I signed off on it. I'm just going to keep going back to that. Right. So
I like that. That's cool. I'll have to make my mental checklist for my stuff. And yeah, I like how you referred to it as a contract, and kind of dials them in a little bit more.
yeah.
So my last kind of question before we wrap things up, and kind of hinted on it earlier on, is yes, you're an individual sport, but you specifically are working really hard on creating a team of people around you, to make you feel the best and perform the best. Maybe talk about what that means to you, what maybe some of these people do for you now, to make you, the best athlete and best person that you can be, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So ski cross specifically, kind of interesting, like you said, is an individual sport, but we do travel as Team Canada. So we travel like as a team, and you see us operate as a team. But on race day, when we're in the gate, even if you're like actually at the last race, I was beside 3 other Canadians, which never happens, but we were, and it was like I was trying to beat them, they were trying to beat me. It was like, we're not holding back. That's like we're gonna race fair, race hard, but at the end of the day, who's the best guy? And then so that's part of it. So that, Team Canada, I obviously look towards certain people that like give me energy, people that I can kind of go to talk to, whatever it is. But oftentimes you need something a little bit more. And that's, again, it's just about building those relationships, even outside of Team Canada, whatever it is. And they don't necessarily need to be people that are around all the time for me, but just, my parents are a big energy, for me, and I talk to them usually before every race, just kind of like, for me, that centers me quite well. And they kind of bring me back to where it's like, hey, you just started this for fun, like go out and have fun.
Yeah.
So like that brings me back. And again, it gets me out of that like really hyper-focused state too early, which I know I can do by myself quite well. People like my girlfriend, just nice to have like a touch point outside of the sport, because again, it's like you said, go back to that balance board. What do you need in your life to make yourself happy? And I started to really realize that this year, and that's kind of what I've reflected on at the end of the season here, is that energy that I surround myself with is super important for me to find the difference between making it through those first 2 rounds versus not, and going to like a podium performance. So if I feel like I'm in a good state, the rest of the world can be like going to shit. We can have everything not working. Like to give you an example, last race, my family was there, friends were there, we're at my home club. This is where I grew up skiing. So like incredible energy that was there surrounding that race for me specifically. Like there was a cutout billboard of me on the side that kids were taking pictures with. We were signing autographs like crazy. You felt like a superstar, right? And it was like, wow, I used to be one of those kids, and now I'm here racing in front of them. Like I took a lot of that in, and I was like, wow, it feels really cool. And I'm glad, I'm super honored to be able to do that for them. And the other side of this was my boot bag didn't show up. So Air Canada lost my boot bag for this race. So luckily I traveled with my ski boots, because it's probably the hardest thing to get. And I had my race suit, but every other piece of equipment, from back guard, helmet, gloves, socks, like underwear, like everything that normally I would have was not there. And so I had to piece it together from like other athletes on my team and whatever, but went and bought a couple things. But, stuff felt weird on race day. My race suit didn't fit the same. I didn't have like the same protection on. So again, it was like, well, why did I still have one of my best performances of the season at the last race there? And it was not because of like all the other shit that was going wrong. It was because I focused on the energy that was surrounding me at that race. So yes, I think it's just about being aware of where you're at as an athlete, depending on where you are in your season, career, whatever. And then just building out those energy systems around you, whether it's energy takers, energy givers. Each person's going to be a little bit different. And for me, it's just surrounding myself with positive energy seems to lead to good performance.
That's awesome. And I always say, people come in and out of your lives, like you said, energy givers, takers, for different reasons, and lessons to be learned all around. But no, nonetheless, I think you kind of wrapped it up. You kind of took us on a journey here from start to finish. And, I appreciate you coming on and kind of just summing it up is like you're talking about that balance board. finding where you put your energy, who you surround yourself with, and, committing, signing that contract to the process, are just things that are so important if you want to perform at an elite level, like such as yourself. And I always take it even to the real world. If you have a career, a relationship, like these things are just so important. And I'm glad you've kind of touched on everything, which has been, I learned quite a bit, and I'll take some of the tools you have with me in my own life and my own journey as well. So Kris, thanks again for coming on, and I can't wait for the next season to come. I'll be following along. Lastly, I just want to say your YouTube channel, I've follow along if people want to follow along with you, Chasing the Globe. Here you've gave us some more context to it. So people who are going to listen to this, if you want to follow along with Kris, social account and YouTube channel, I highly recommend. I enjoyed the videos as well. So Kris, thanks for coming on. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Hey, Ryan. Well, I appreciate it, man. And I think what you guys are doing here with the podcast is pretty cool, and giving, well, it's kind of similar to what I'm trying to do with the YouTube stuff. Just give people an inside view as to what we do. And I guess even further, if, you have some of your listeners that reach out to you and want to get in contact with me, feel free to send them my contact info. And, like social media is probably easiest, to be honest. And I appreciate the time and the questions. I love chatting about this stuff. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Kris.